We are in a very large 24,000 to 26,000 year cycle, depending on what system you're looking at. And in the yoga traditions, this is called the Yuga Cycle. And it's known that there are these cycles of human development that are related to this larger astronomical change, which I talked about yesterday was the precession of the equinoxes. So just to know that there are changes of how our world, our Earth, relates to the solar system, relates to the sun, and relates to the galactic center, right? And changes over long periods of time. Right. And so that's part of what is influencing us. And in the yoga traditions, we have been in what they call the Kali Yuga. And the Kali Yuga is the most difficult part of the whole Yuga cycle. It is a time of darkness, of violence, of coercion, of domination. And this has been our experience of coming into this time of patriarchy, which, and I'll just say, when I say the word patriarchy, I'm not criticizing men. Patriarchy is a hierarchical system of domination that's hard on everybody. Okay. So, and it includes, it's related to the age of empire. And so we are evolving out of all of this, and we're evolving out of the Kali Yuga. And I was part of a program earlier this year from people at Divine Mother Center here. They're they're Westerners, but have spent a lot of time in India and are very much in the tradition that they're in. And the leader of that group shared with us that one of her teachers in India had said, "Oh, we've now moved out of the Kali Yuga." And of course, these cycles are huge, right? So it's not like one day to the next, we're going to feel the difference, right? It's not that. But it is about this shifting that's happening. So there's that, right? And then and I'll put this other video up in the resources, but there's another man who's an Indian scholar who I recently watched an interview that Heather Unsworth did with him, which is really fascinating. And he was placing this change out of the Kali Yuga, or this particular part of this bigger cycle, in 2025, in March of 2025. And then in the human design world, we talk about the change of 2027. So just to say, there's all these different systems that are pointing to this deeply transformative time. And that when you transition from one era to another, there's turbulence, right? And that makes sense. And we've certainly felt that with the end of Capricorn and the beginning of Aquarius. There's turbulence during these times, during transition periods. And one of the simplest metaphors, probably one that you're aware of, is like when you're in an airplane and you're at a certain level of height, what do they call that? Sorry, right? You're at a certain height, right? And then altitude. Thank you. Thank you, Natalie. Certain altitude, right? And you want to go up to a higher altitude. But to get to that altitude, you go through an area of bumpy space. Right. And so while you're going up there, before you've gotten to your next level, you can have some of this going on. Right. So that's kind of what we're experiencing. Right. But with these larger cycles. And so we're in a little bit of area bumpy space. You might think of it that way. Right. And so what do we do during periods of bumpy space? That is one of our big questions. What do we do in the times of transition? And then also, how are we really growing ourselves and preparing ourselves to be in this next yuga, right? How do we go to our next level of growth and development, and stages of enlightenment, if you like to use that word? So, like, I know yesterday when we were talking, it's easy to kind of get a bit heavy when we're thinking about the challenges and we look in the outer world, and, there's turmoil all over the outer world. There's lots of places you can look and you can find it. I mean, right now, here I am in Sebastopol, and we are at the beginning of receiving an atmospheric river. So what's an atmospheric river? It's basically a river in the sky that when it hits land is going to dump a huge amount of rain in a short period of time. And this is what is happening for us here in California, especially in Northern California and along the west coast of the US, is that we're starting to get more and more atmospheric rivers, which, as you might imagine, create flooding and all the things that happens when you get a lot of rain in a short period of time. So this is one of the ways that our earth changes are influencing me and my life. And just so you know, if I lose power, that's what happens. But I'll be back. Hopefully that's not going to happen while we're all together. But it might, because it has happened before. So just to say, that's one area of what's happening in the outer world that you could be like, oh yeah, there's turmoil there. You know, I have friends who are in North Carolina, and what happened recently in Western North Carolina, there's somebody, there's Ola, who's in our Sovereign Sisterhood, and she was in Poland. She lives in Poland, and Poland was underwater not too long ago. Paris was underwater not too long ago, right? These are all ways that we're seeing it's kind of tumultuous energy in the outer world, and that's in the living world, right? But then we also see right. And in Spain too. Okay. Yeah. I mean, probably many parts of the world, places that I don't even know about, right? Because I don't try to track all of it. But wherever you are in the world, you probably have your own experience, even if it hasn't hit your individual life directly, probably people that you know. You know, we've had a lot of fires here. I know in Canada, there were a lot of fires. I know in Australia, there have been a lot of fires. You know, it's just anywhere you look, you can see that. Right. So, you know, and if you look, you know, there's war that's happening, you know, there's just all the kinds of stuff. So what do we do in a situation like that? And so we want to be able to really tune into our own selves. I think that this is always the best practice when things in the outer world feel too overwhelming or too crazy or whatever, right? But especially now, because this is what Pluto is also saying, is as Pluto moves into Aquarius, we're saying it's time to reclaim your sovereignty. It's time to reclaim the recognition of your own inner guidance, your own experience of being a spiritual force, right? You are a spiritual force in a human form, having an experience on this beautiful planet, you know, with all these other people and with this incredible living world, right? To reclaim that from whatever anybody else has told you who you are, what you should do, what your purpose is, what your contribution is, what's going to make you happy, what's going to make you successful, all of that, right? To be reclaiming that for yourself.